If you are tuning into this episode the day that it comes out, then please join me in having a bit of a celebration for the fact that the doors to Onnit 2026 are officially open. This date only rolls around once per year, and it is particularly exciting this year because the doors are not going to open again in 2026. This year, I gave people the opportunity every quarter to sneak in midway through, whether it was because they had FOMO or they wished they'd joined, but they hadn't. But that is not happening for 2026. There will be one opportunity to join, and then once January rolls around and we kick off with our vision session at the start of Jan, doors will be locked, and those that are in will be in and ready to make the year full of growth. I am so excited for the doors to Onnit to reopen for next year. You might be familiar with the fact that Onnit launched for the very first time this time last year, and it was very much an idea. It was an idea that I believed in, but it was unproven because it was new. And now, almost a year on, I can firmly say that it is the most impactful, simple, accessible thing I've ever created. If you're not familiar, the principle of Onnit is helping you to work on your business, not in it. And it's built on my belief that as a business owner, you probably don't need to be told what to do or to learn more. You need a space where you can step back, ask yourself the big questions, break your goals down into manageable chunks, track your progress, and do all of that in a space where ambition and honesty and self-reflection is celebrated. A few weeks ago, I actually gave current Onnit members a little sneaky private access to join for next year, and I was so overwhelmed by their response. I think we had one person join per minute for like the first 10-15 minutes of that email going out. And I had so many emails and messages from current members being like, of course I'm in, best investment I've made this year. It was a no-brainer. And that's the best marketing I could ever give for this program. I can tell you it's great. I can tell you why you need it. But the people that have been in it, that have tried and tested it, deciding to stay, continuing to invest in it, now that is the best sales pitch I could ever give you. So if you've been thinking about joining Onnit, the time is now. There is an early bird price for this first chunk of the launch. And if you also join now, you'll get an exclusive welcome gift of some stationery that I have custom designed just for the Onnit program. The link will be in the show notes wherever you're tuning in. And I'm really excited to see who joins, especially this launch day is always an exciting one. Now, to celebrate the launch of Onnit 2026, I wanted to kick off a mini series here on the podcast called How I Did It. I've talked a lot on this podcast about the behind the scenes of my business, about the reality of what my growth has looked like, and always just trying to unpack what you don't always see online. And this series is going to take that a step further. I'm going to unpack some of the key milestones and wins that I've had in my business journey and explain to you not just practically what made them happen, but the action that I took that you might not have seen and the mindsets that I adopted that you definitely wouldn't have seen that helped to make it a reality. I'm going to talk about how I got into Forbes, how I got my first client, how I became happier as a business owner, how I doubled my profit, and today I'm kicking off with how I got my book deal. I'm going to reverse engineer for you what happened in order for me to become a published author last year. Now, I've told the story here on the podcast about how I got offered my book deal because my publishers approached me and they said, we'd love for you to write a book. And then I sent a proposal and then we signed a contract and then I wrote it and blah, blah, blah. I've told that story before. The story that I haven't told before is what happened before that moment that led to me being offered a book deal. What I did as a business owner in order to receive that email in June of 2022 from a publisher saying, we would like you to write a book. And in this episode, I am breaking that down for the first time. Now, when I sat down to think about, right, what did I do? What led to me being offered a book deal? I was kind of in this investigation mode. You know, so often in business, we don't see a really direct and quick link between our action and our results. I think that's one of the hardest things about running a business is that you have to trust the process. You can't always see the seeds you're planting and what they're going to go on to create. But what's great is when you look backwards, when you reflect, you can piece it together. So if I were to reverse engineer, right, what happened in order for me to be offered a book deal from one of the biggest publishers in the UK, I can see that in January of 2021, I started to really make that happen. Let me take you back. January 2021, I was sitting down, as I always do at the start of the year or the end of the previous one, to cast my vision. If you're not familiar, I have something called the AB method. It was originally developed just because I needed more structure in my business growth, but it's now gone on to be tried, tested, and used by hundreds, if not thousands of business owners. It's what Onnit is built on. And the first step of the AB method is all about casting vision. Before we set goals, before we take action, before we track progress, we have to have vision. And when I say vision, I don't mean what's your 5-year plan? Exactly where are you going to be in the long term? Do you know every detail of your long-term vision? That's not vision to me. To me, vision is just about whatever level of clarity you have around what's important to you, what you want to change and improve within your business, and ultimately the direction you're going in. I don't believe that vision has to be crystal clear or super specific. And vision is an incredibly personal thing. So when I sat down in this January of 2021, which is over 4 years ago now, I started thinking about what I wanted from my business. I completed the exercises that I've done so for years that we do in Onnit in January. And I was thinking about, right, what excites me? What do I want from my business? What's the internal purpose here? What's the external purpose? We do a great exercise in Onnit where we think about your internal and your external why. Internal being, what do you want your business to do for you? External being, what do you want your business to do for others? And something I noticed continually showing up as I was doing these various exercises and just bringing clarity to the surface was that I was really excited about having external opportunities which allowed me to reach more people, create things that were more accessible, and ultimately step up as a thought leader and as an expert. I was thinking in that moment about doing a TED Talk, writing a book, getting speaking opportunities. All different things that I was excited by, but ultimately had this common thread of being seen as an expert and being able to share that expertise in different settings. At that point, my business was very much focused still on just doing one-to-one work, and I love that, but I was ready to start to diversify. So with that in mind, I started to think, right, what are my intentions for the year? In the AB method, we set yearly intentions. And everyone in Onnit does this in January because they help cast your vision for the year. Instead of vision always just feeling quite big and vague, yearly intentions make it more specific. And my suggestion is to set 3 that really capture the key areas you want to grow in. Now, January of 2021, one of my yearly intentions was about defining a clear and memorable reputation. How did I land on that yearly intention, and how does that link to getting a book deal? Well, when I thought about those opportunities, right, when I'd seen all of this clarity come to the surface that I wanted to kind of collaborate with people, speak on stages, potentially write a book one day, I asked myself, right, what would it take for those things to happen? What do I have control of that could help those things come true in my business? And one of the biggest things that I realized as I reflected on that and started to reverse engineer that vision was my reputation. I think of marketing, personal branding really just as reputation building. And in that moment, I realized, okay, if I want my business to go in this direction, what I can do in 2021 to control that is to focus on reputation building. So one of my yearly intentions for 2021 was exactly that, to have a reputation that was clear, that was memorable, that was aligned with ultimately the opportunities that I wanted to attract. So I reverse engineered it. But obviously I didn't stop there. Then every quarter throughout 2021, I set tangible, actionable goals that link to that. Because it's great to have an intention that captures your vision, right? Like, oh, I want a better reputation, but like, what does that mean? When I wake up on the 5th of March, what does it look like to work towards that vision? Well, that's where my goals came into place. So every quarter throughout 2021, I broke down more tangible goals. Things like, okay, this quarter, I'm going to really focus on the podcast strategy and who can I get on the podcast and what conversations can I have and what topics can I explore that's going to align with that. Some quarters, it was all about research and clarification, goals that enabled me to get clearer on what that reputation was. Some quarters I set goals around specific collaborations, pitching myself for things, getting visibility, being in new rooms. A goal is not the thing you want. It's the practical thing that you can do to get closer to the thing you want. And throughout 2021, because I had this yearly intention, I kept setting goals that linked with it. That meant that by the end of 2021, I hadn't, reached that final destination of perfect reputation, because it's a constantly evolving thing that I still work on to this day. But I'd absolutely moved my business forwards in that area. If I hadn't have set that yearly intention, my reputation would have still grown that year, but I can promise you it would not have been the big, clear, focused growth that it ended up becoming. Now, because of that focus in 2021, what happened was in 2022, I got offered a book deal. And that book deal was offered because of what I'd put out online. The wording in that email quite literally said, we've seen your content. We found you via these different channels. They'd actually initially found me via a collaboration that I'd done that my visibility had led to. We've got a taster of you and your work, and we think you're the perfect person to write a book about marketing. That is what they said, this big publisher, when they reached out to me. And you can see how that intention I set from January 2021 is what meant that 18 months later, I got offered a book deal. In that moment, I remember feeling really lucky and thinking like, oh my gosh, how lucky am I? They've offered me a book deal. But I look back and realize actually I sowed the seeds for that. I couldn't see exactly how it was going to piece together, but I had a vision at the start of 2021 and I took action towards that. So what can we learn from this? Well, firstly, when we want something that feels maybe slightly out of our control, out of our reach, we have to reverse engineer it and think about what we can control and do that's going to lead to it. If you have big vision around something like getting a book deal or perhaps achieving something that you're not in full control of, don't let that be a reason not to go for that goal. But don't set that as the goal. Set goals that are going to help you sow seeds for that thing happening. My vision for that year, my yearly intention was not get a book deal. It was work on my reputation because I'd worked out that was what was going to help me get that. And it worked. So we need to think about reverse engineering. We need to step back and reflect and piece the dots together of, right, if I want this thing, what could I control and do to get there? I think the other thing that we can really learn from this is that we're always planting seeds. And there are moments where we need to be patient and not always look for direct results. It is a very indirect result, right? That content that I was putting out there throughout 2021, people that I was connecting with, conversations that I was having, podcast episodes I was creating, I couldn't see it at the time. I had to trust the process, but they were planting seeds. They ultimately then created an incredible result for me of getting a book deal, but it was an indirect one. So there's also something in that, I think, of having that vision and sticking at it. Can you imagine if by the end of February, I was like, whoa, I'm bored of that goal because I haven't got a book deal yet? Because I had the A/B method, because every quarter I kept chipping away and I had that structure and I knew this is my vision for the year. I'm not steering away from it. I kept going and I put in the consistency. And that is the much longer but much more honest answer of how I got offered a book deal and how I got a publishing deal with one of the UK's biggest publishers. I really hope that you found this an interesting listen. I've really enjoyed actually recording this and kind of taking you down memory lane and reminding myself as well, wow, so many smaller steps. I didn't even see it at the time, but I kind of knew they might piece together. If this has resonated with you, if you've heard me talk about that idea of setting those yearly intentions, capturing your vision in a way that feels really clear but is allowed to still evolve, and then ultimately chipping away each quarter and breaking it down into those manageable chunks, which, let's be specific here, are manageable chunks that you can control. You do not set a goal like get a book deal. You set the goal that's what you need to do to get a book deal. Then let me tell you that On It is going to be for you. The A/B method is what On It is built on. Our first session in January will include those vision exercises that I talked to you about and many more, and setting your yearly intentions. So you can have a think about, right, what opportunities do I want to get? And then I'm going to hold space for you to reverse engineer that. You don't have to sit with a notebook and scratch your head and avoid distractions and try and do it by yourself. I'll make it easy. I'll give you the questions. I'll give you the structure so that whatever opportunities you want to get, you can reverse engineer them. You can sow those seeds and trust the process. The link to join On It will be in the show notes. You want to make sure that you join soon to take access of that early bird price and also get the bonus stationery. There's going to be some great episodes coming out over the next few weeks. More of these episodes sharing how I achieved certain things, breaking things down, and also some really exciting conversations. Yes, there are guest episodes coming back to the podcast for a short time where you can learn from some really inspiring business owners about how they've created growth in their business this year. So you're not just finding out how I've done things, but you can learn from some other people as well. So make sure that you're followed or subscribed wherever you're listening to this so that you don't miss out. Check out On It by heading to the link in the show notes, or you can go to alicebenham.co.uk/on it and make a decision that your future self is going to be very grateful for. All right, I'll catch you in the next episode.